You're listening to episode 106 of Literacy in Color. If you've ever wondered what orthographic mapping actually is and what's happening inside the brain when students learn to read, then this episode is for you. I'm joined by the brilliant Dr. Katie Pace-Miles, a true reading science expert. Dr. Miles wears many hats, especially inside of New York City, as an associate professor and director of the Advanced Certificates in Reading Science at Brooklyn College. She's also author of Reading Ready and the academic advisor of Reading Go. She's co-author of Reading Ready for Whole Phonics and, of course, the Scholastic Science of Reading and Practice book, Making Words Stick. She also is co-founder and principal investigator of CUNY Reading Corps, which improves pre-service teacher training and provides free high-dosage tutoring to over 2,300 historically underserved New York City students per year. And of course, she's the founder and president of the Reading Institute, which brings free, evidence-based tutoring programs to striving readers across the country and provides reading science-aligned professional development to teachers. In this episode, we not only explore the science behind how words become permanently stored in memory, but also what makes high-impact tutoring or intervention truly effective, and how her work is helping transform literacy instruction across New York City and beyond. Welcome to the Literacy in Color podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Sullivan, a science of reading advocate with over a decade of experience as a reading interventionist and literacy coach. I'm passionate about making evidence-based instruction both effective and engaging. If you're interested in captivating our learners on reading fluently and understanding language, or as I like to call it, keeping it colorful, then you've found the right place. Each week, we'll explore intriguing lit bits and practical strategies around the science of reading and structured literacy to help you be colorful and teach colorfully. Are you ready to bring literacy to life? Let's color outside the lines and make an impact together. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Literacy in Color. And I don't use this term lightly, but I'm joined by one of my Science of Reading sheroes, and that would be Dr. Katie Pace-Miles, who is a legend in the structured literacy community. So welcome to the show today. I'm so happy to have you here.
Oh my God, that was way too generous. My goodness, you have me laughing. Thank you for that. I really appreciate it and can barely accept it, but thank you.
Oh my goodness, it's all true. Today we're going to be diving into a little bit of orthographic mapping and a lot of the work that you do within the Reading Institute and the impact that you're having on New York City public schools in particular. But before we dive in, maybe you can just share a bit about your background and how you first got interested in reading research.
Sure. So I was a teacher and I very quickly became obsessed with how the young students I was working with were able to easily pick up the ability to read, or they struggled to pick it up, even though I was giving everyone the same instruction. Simultaneously, I was frustrated with the field of education that I felt ill-prepared to teach kids how to read. And when I did my master's, I decided to go into educational psychology. And it was in that field. So I left the field of education at that point, went in solidly into psychology and discovered this whole realm of what we refer to as the science of reading. And in that field, I started finding some answers to these questions that I was having about instruction. So I became a reading specialist. They would call us a learning specialist at that time, but over 80% of the students in my caseload were working with me on their reading. And from there, I wound up with a fellowship. Many people know to work with Dr. Linnea Airy, who is considered the godmother of reading science. And I worked with Linnea on this fellowship for 5 years, learning about her theories and whatnot. And then I wound up as a professor at Brooklyn College.
Your name is published on some of these popular papers in the reading research, especially around orthographic mapping. So maybe you can share a bit about what orthographic mapping is exactly, what's happening in the brain when words become mapped, and how that whole process happens.
Absolutely. The theory of orthographic mapping comes from a body of research that was established by Dr. Linnea Airy, and the experiments that she conducted have been replicated over time and in various countries using different languages. And the theory is the most substantiated theory of how words are stored in long term memory. And orthographic mapping is a cognitive process that has been determined through these studies that there is a cognitive process that takes place where, as an emergent reader, you glue together the spelling of a word with its pronunciation and its meaning. And when the glue between the spelling and pronunciation are in place and you attach that meaning, it forms an amalgam. That's a term that Airy uses. It forms an amalgam that is stored away in long-term memory. Now, this is not an instantaneous process. This happens and this glue forms and this amalgam is clarified over time so that eventually words are stored in long-term memory so that at some point you see a word and you can instantaneously or automatically say the word.
You also have co-authored a wonderful book with Dr. Molly Ness in very teacher-friendly practitioner language, Making Words Stick, that dives deeper into the process and shares a lot of instructional routines on how to promote this mapping process in the brain, this cognitive process. And so what might be breaking down if a student has difficulty remembering words?
What I don't often emphasize enough, and I want to take a minute here to talk about, is a student's oral language vocabulary is the foundation upon which words are eventually mapped and stored in memory. So while the glue is between the pronunciation and the spelling of the word, it's that meaning where the student can find the word. And, I often use the example of mitten because this was one that I saw happening in real time where emergent multilingual learner was saying mit 10, and couldn't find the word mitten because the child didn't know, it didn't have the word mitten in their oral vocabulary. And so that's just a part of the theory that I really want to emphasize. So everything in literacy, as we know, starts with oral language. From oral language, we are able to build upon, and as Dr. Marion Wolf will say, we bootstrap onto our oral language skills the ability to read. And so that is just such a critical part of the theory of orthographic mapping.
Yeah, I'm so glad you referred to that. And I love Charles Hume has that newer model of language showing, from birth to 5, how that oral language is just such an important component. And it doesn't start in kindergarten.
That's right.
We think we're teaching the alphabetic principle when students are 4, 5, 6 years old. And yet we do need this other foundation to build all of that upon. So it's really helpful to keep that into consideration and to know that you can't map a word that you don't know the meaning of. And that's particularly why high frequency words are so tricky because they're really nebulous in meaning, really obscure, and don't have a weighty lexical content to them.
Well said.
And does forming your skill-based groups feel a little mysterious? You have the screening data, but you're still asking, okay, how do I use this to move students forward? A good friend of the podcast, Dr. Stephanie Stoller, runs the Reading Science Academy, and she created an exclusive grouping resource bundle free for Literacy in Color listeners. You'll get Stephanie's cheat sheets for grouping students at the beginning, middle, and end of the year, plus a video that walks you through a real classroom example. I'll always proclaim that I myself am a proud Reading Science Academy member for life, and I can genuinely say that the quality of the resources and professional learning is top-notch. The Facebook community is also one of the most supportive spaces I've experienced. Reading Science Academy is honestly one of the first places I go whenever I have a question about literacy instruction or assessment. So go to readingscienceacademy.com/color to get your free grouping resource bundle today. Your work particularly has really influenced a lot of the creation of some really powerful resources and materials that can impact intervention, the creation of Reading Ready and Reading Go. So maybe you can talk about how that all came to be.
I'd be happy to. So, as a professor at Brooklyn College, I had the great pleasure of doing consulting work on the Reading Go program. It was formerly called Reading Rescue. And over several years, I rewrote the program to ensure its alignment to the science of reading. When the author of that program retired, she tapped me as kind of like the academic guardian of the program. I was very happy to come on board, and there's strong RCT evidence, randomized control trial evidence on Reading Go. Now, in the pandemic in New York City, when that hit, schools were shuttered. I was home with, I have two little kids, not as little anymore, but my daughter was learning how to read. And two things happened simultaneously in the pandemic in 2020. One is that I started CUNY Reading Fellows, which I can talk about in a little bit, which is a high impact tutoring initiative that continues to grow and thrive to this day. But also, I realized that while I founded CUNY Reading Fellows using the Reading Go program, there was this missing critical moment of need for students who were in kindergarten and first grade who were not getting any instruction in the New York City public schools in this critical window of learning how to read. I was teaching my daughter how to read. She was just coming into emergent literacy skills. And I had for many, many years thought about like, oh, how would I teach my daughter and then my son eventually how to read? And I had always thought of, oh, I would use this protocol. I would cut out all of the noise and just do this. And I wrote down the way that I was teaching Georgie how to read. And that is Reading Ready. And so what eventually happened is CUNY Reading Fellows gets off the ground. I formalized the Reading Ready program, and then both Reading Ready and Reading Go are used in CUNY Reading Fellows, which is a high impact tutoring initiative, again, that started at Brooklyn College, but is now CUNY wide. And I always want to thank the CUNY Reading Fellows full-time team that is run by expert tutors themselves and an incredible director of the initiative. And they now have scaled it to where 750 CUNY students are trained in either Reading Ready or Reading Go each year. And those CUNY students tutor, I think, just about 3,000 New York City public school students every year. So the impact year over year has been quite incredible. Has really helped out schools who need so much more intervention support than what one interventionist at that school can provide. So,
That's
yeah.
incredible. That is absolutely incredible. I love the origin story. I love that it was
Oh,
with your mother hat.
yeah,
And
totally with the mom hat on.
yeah, just tuning out all the noise, and so many programs can have the bells and whistles, but what are the practices that are going to be most efficient for just building that reading circuit? And what a beautiful impact to have in New York City public schools. And it's really cool to think about so many teachers who have been in the field for 5, 10, 15, 20 years who still don't know this stuff. And here we have CUNY students doing the work and learning
Yes.
from the get go. I think that's especially powerful years
Yes.
down the road. We might not
You
even have some of these issues.
I appreciate you saying that because we in New York City now I founded this nonprofit called the Reading Institute based on that work because two things were happening. We had these in-service teachers who would see what the CUNY students were doing, either in person or in the pandemic virtually. And these teachers would say, what program are they using? I want to get trained in that. What are those materials? What's that cool kit that they get? And so teachers started reaching out to get access to the programs. And so that happened. And also, I'm really proud to report that the nonprofit, the Reading Institute, has worked with 34 universities this year who use Reading Ready or Reading Go to improve their pre-service teacher training. But next year, we're expected to have 50 universities across the country who are going to use these programs to improve pre-service teacher training and help their local communities.
Amazing, and it's gonna
It's
continue to grow when people
oh,
keep hearing these success stories.
oh, I hope so. I hope so. We give the programs for free to any professor who wants to improve what they're doing with their field work. So that's just a shout out to professors to reach out. And also any schools or districts, everything is kept at low or no cost. So that's a big part of my concern about the science of reading is that it is becoming too expensive to either get trained or find programs and whatnot. And so I really prioritize efficient, effective, affordable science of reading supports.
Yeah, and it just opens the access to all. We say literacy and justice for all, but let's make it happen for all our students.
Absolutely.
Reading Ready and Reading Go are really structured programs. So, what are some of the guiding principles behind how they've been created?
What I hold as the North Star for both programs is the theory of orthographic mapping. And so in Reading Ready, what I wanted to do was ensure that students who are just emerging into their word reading and spelling skills, that they develop good word reading habits from the start. I had witnessed too many students, really in like kindergarten, who started out of the gate guessing at words and at times were encouraged from instructors to guess at words. And I saw how difficult that was to undo in later years. And so, particularly with Reading Ready, I wrote it so that it is highly decodable. So, across the 30 to 60 sessions, I only used 6 irregular high frequency words in the decodable sentences that the students eventually read and spell. So the way the program goes is at the start of each session or each lesson, you have a set of letters that you're reviewing, the letter sound correspondences. You then go into your phonemic awareness practice where you're fine tuning your ears to those sounds. You go into word analysis and the words are only constructed out of those letter sound correspondences that you're working on mastering. Then in sentence dictation and decodable sentence reading, again, the words are overwhelmingly decodable based on those letter sound correspondences with only, and I think it's like in the first 2 or 3 units, there's only 2 irregular high frequency words that we use. And from there, again, across all of the lessons, I only build up to 6 irregular high frequency words that are used so that, again, those really strong word reading habits are built in. The irregular high frequency word decision comes out of my body of research with Dr. Airy on the orthographic regularity of high frequency words. So anyway, that is how I built Reading Ready. Now we do have decodable books now that are associated with Reading Ready, which has been really helpful with the transition. If students also need Reading Go, what the Reading Institute has been able to do with Reading Go is think very thoughtfully about the titration or the reduction of decodability over time. So in units 1, 2, and 3 of Reading Go, things are really tightly decodable. It's like 85% decodable, but with the text that students are reading. But by the time you're in unit 14 in Reading Go, you are reading books that are around like 65% decodable. So we do have to acknowledge this transition of moving students out of entirely decodable text into more authentic text.
Yeah, that's really helpful. It's been really intentional in how you've designed your lessons. I really appreciate the fact that these routines that you utilize within the lessons are no fluff, and yet success breeds motivation. They're able to be successful, and students are excited and engaged in the lessons because they're able to do the work. And
That's
I
right.
think that's a huge part of why people are finding such great success with the program.
Oh, thanks for that.
When you think about the qualities of what makes an intervention really effective, what do you think are some of the things that we need to take into consideration?
Well, the thing I emphasize most about intervention, aside from it needing to be structured literacy evidence based, for me, it becomes all about dosage. When I established CUNY Reading Fellows, it was based on the body of research called, at the time, high dosage tutoring, and now is referred to as high impact tutoring. But I like to call it high impact intervention. It means that students need to receive their intervention 3 to 5 days a week in order for us to really move the needle and help those students progress. If we are taking it seriously, that we are trying to get them to reach grade level expectations. And this is well established in the research that interventions need to take place 3 to 5 days a week. The body of research on high impact tutoring that comes out of Stanford's National Student Support Accelerator or John Hopkins Proven Tutoring is very clear that it's the high dosage. Now, high dosage has evolved over time. Like at first it's got to be 3 to 5 days a week. Now there's some evidence that so long as it's 90 minutes broken up over the course of the week, you could break it up that way. I stick with the 3 to 5 day a week protocol with both Reading Ready and Reading Go. And that is very much because we insist that tutors provide that level of availability to meet with their students, that we get the outcomes that we're seeing.
Yeah. And the consistency of the intervention is really what's going to make a big impact. If an interventionist sees someone once a week, it's lost and forgotten by the next week. So I think the dosage aspect is really important too. And just for clarity's sake, for schools who are adopting this would be a small group table kind of instruction, not necessarily whole class
Right.
instruction.
Right. So when it's tutoring, it's done. That's a really important distinction, Michelle, that you're bringing up here, because when I talk about tutoring, I'm talking about training individuals outside of the school who push into the school to provide one-on-one support. At the Reading Institute, we also train schools. We train classroom teachers and paraprofessionals or teachers' assistants who provide the intervention in small groups. And there's a great case study for this at PS 152 in Queens here in New York City, where this Principal Russo had so many first graders in need of intervention. She had all of her first grade teachers trained in Reading Ready. She used the placement guide and figured out which students needed to be in Unit 1 versus Unit 3 versus Unit 5 of the intervention. She had all of the first graders do a walk to read where they were put into their groups based on units, and she kept the groups as small as possible. And the teacher provided that intervention every day, 5 days a week. These kiddos got their intervention, and she cut her percent of students at risk in half over the course of time based on her Acadian scores.
It's incredible. It's
It was
incredible. I'm
incredible.
actually interviewing her and her first grade team
Ah,
next week.
no way. Oh
And we're
my
gonna talk
goodness.
about their success story. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's a big one. Oh, that makes me so happy. They're really dynamic.
Yeah.
The level of thought that they put into implementing this intervention was inspirational to me. And you've got to ask them about their materials management. That was remarkable. I was in the school watching the teachers execute Reading Ready in small groups, and the way they thought through how to make the materials, how to organize it and make them quickly and readily available at every transition point in the lesson. It
Yeah.
was incredible.
Yeah. And that's one of the difficulties of implementing some high quality intervention is if you have a certain amount of time allotted, you want to keep that perky pace and
Yeah,
you don't want to
that's
waste
right.
their time. You want to make every minute count of that instructional moment. And it takes a really skillful, artful teacher to be brisk with those transitions and make sure, hey, we're ready for the next thing. You're not going to be spending the next 5 minutes cutting cards out, or I have to get up and go get my chips or blocks.
Exactly. Exactly.
You talked about how these interventions are being brought across the nation. So, how have you scaled the dissemination of some of these interventions through the Reading Institute?
Oh, the Reading Institute team is incredible. A big shout out to that team. They are working full time to bring these interventions to, as I mentioned, universities, and they are thinking through how to do state level initiatives with universities. So, right now, I think we have 14 universities in New York State. I believe we have 10 universities in Iowa that are starting next year. And I think something like 10 universities in Minnesota. My numbers may be slightly off. Christina and Emily are the ones at the Reading Institute that keep those numbers organized. But they're trying to think through how CUNY was able to scale this because they centralized the resources, like the team that runs the implementation. And so the team at the Reading Institute is thinking through, okay, once we have interest from a few universities in a state, how can we help that state think about centralizing their grant funds so that they can have a wider impact on pre-service teacher training? Then also, the team at the Reading Institute is very thoughtful about their school level partnerships and their district partnerships. And again, this is a shout out to Emily and Shawnette there, who go in and do trainings and they figure out, okay, do we need to do in person trainings or remote trainings? And how can we train individuals and then fade into the background? As the Reading Institute, we want to build capacity for schools, districts, and community based organizations. So, also, the Reading Institute considers how and who we should reach out to in the community who has access to groups of retired teachers or community volunteers who are interested in being trained in these programs. And we can then pair them with schools in need of support. So there's been some really thoughtful work around that. There's also been some great work at the Reading Institute working with after school providers as well as high school students. We've worked with high school seniors who are considering education as a major, and then we train them in the intervention programs, and then they're tutoring students in the elementary school affiliated with their high school. Also, I want to give a shout out to Maddie over at the Reading Institute, who helps me and Emily work on revising the programs every year. We do program revisions on Reading Ready and Reading Go to continually streamline the programs and ensure that training on these programs is as efficient and as effective as possible, because we are overwhelmingly working with novice teachers or tutors. And so we always have that novice in mind as we create the asynchronous training or we revise our materials.
That's so powerful. And from an interventionist background, I always would carry this belief, whoever's working with the students who are struggling the most, they have to be really knowledgeable. I would worry when I would see
Right.
schools who would hire teachers' aides to deliver intervention without the training and support. And so it's
Yep.
really just uplifting to hear like how much actually goes into making sure these people are equipped to do the job well. And
Yeah,
they don't need a master's in literacy to be able to
that's
teach a
right.
kid to read, but they do need some instruction beyond just bring these kids to the back table. And so that's why the work
Exactly.
that you do is so wonderful too.
Oh, thank you for that. I was really inspired by Dr. Airy. She ran an RCT with Dr. Nora Hoover, who wrote Read and Go. She conducted the study, I believe, in 2008, and they looked at whether it was a reading specialist or a paraprofessional who was trained in Read and Go, and whether both groups could implement the program with fidelity. And the result was that they could. And yes, the reading interventionist had some stronger outcomes in certain aspects. I can't remember the study exactly, but I think it was on like word analysis. The reading interventionists were better. They've had more experience. But overall, both groups of individuals were effective in implementing the program, and the outcomes on the literacy assessments were the same. And then for me, living through the pandemic in New York City and seeing how little instruction students were receiving and how completely overwhelmed the teachers were, we had to do something. We had to think outside of the box of how can we help these teachers meet the needs of all of these students who have to learn how to read. Right now, they have to learn how to read. And so there it is. We went for it and really made sure that we focused on not trying to make all of these novices into reading specialists. That's a different skill set. And I could talk about my advanced certificate in reading science. That's where you can go to become a reading specialist. But you can have a huge impact by implementing a high dosage structured literacy intervention with fidelity. You can help a student make tremendous strides with their literacy. And that, in combination with the support of a reading specialist at a school, can really move mountains for a student.
Yeah, 100%. I love when schools really tap into this job embedded coaching and making sure if you put someone in a role, they're going to be successful at it.
That's right.
You play a huge part in shifting the narrative in New York City, which is the largest public school system in the country. So, what has it been like with your involvement with the Reading Institute and CUNY Reading Corps and even your advanced certificate in reading science? What are some of the biggest shifts that you've observed in the Big Apple?
Oh, it's been incredible here. So I wear a couple of different hats here in New York I serve on the Chancellor's Literacy Advisory Council. And separate from that, but related to it, is I opened an advanced certificate in reading science at college that's fully funded. And I want to emphasize that because I think it's a crime that we're asking teachers to get training in the science of reading when they already have a master's degree. So they've had their undergrad and graduate coursework completed and they didn't learn about the science of reading. So I have a fully funded, all online, it's a remote program. 80% of the students are New York City public school teachers who come to us to get this training for free. And so I get to hear what's going on through the Chancellor's Literacy Advisory Council. I hear about it from my students. 88 teachers come through that program every year. And then also at the Reading Institute, we partner with schools. And so we're boots on the ground. We're going in and out and talking to school leaders and teachers about what's been happening. And there's been some incredible shifts. I mean, first and foremost, I want to acknowledge the teachers' eagerness across New York City to learn about the science of reading. And we're overwhelmed with applicants for the advanced certificate. Nobody needs this advanced certificate. In New York, you have to have your master's degree, but you don't need a postmaster's certificate. So that's been very exciting. But in addition to that, at the Reading Institute, we created a 10-hour science of reading course. You could call it a micro credential or a course, all asynchronous. And it's available to anyone on the website for very low cost, but it's available for free to New York City public school teachers. And we've had over 7,000 educators take this course in a year and a half, or maybe it's been 2 years now. And 5,000 of those educators are New York City public school teachers. And apparently another 5,000 are going to take it next year through a partnership we have with NYCPS. And so that just demonstrates eagerness. Like, this is not a requirement. That's people coming to this saying, hey, I'd like to learn more about the science of reading. And a shout out to the schools. We filmed in some New York City public schools for that micro credential. It was so much fun. The second really exciting thing that I see in New York is an embrace of high impact tutoring for schools that need it and a very thoughtful approach to distributing funds for schools who need high impact tutoring the most. So I want to give a shout out for that. Then there's a very obvious one, which is the explicit systematic instruction based on a phonics scope and sequence, and where teachers understand that they also have to provide corrective feedback in the moment. That sounds obvious to those of us who have been living in the science of reading space for a long time. But in New York City, we were overwhelmingly a balanced literacy district. And that is a dramatic change for teachers to pick up the scope and sequence and to teach with such intentionality this series of phonetic elements over time, and to talk from one grade level to the next about where you got in the phonics scope and sequence and what you should review and where you need to pick it up next. So those are huge shifts. And along with that is the use of decodable books. So those are pretty major shifts for New York City.
Yeah, huge. We're coming from the land of Teachers College and a lot of
Yes.
just workshop, and this is where it all originated. And so some people have that close to home. And so it's really nice to see teachers are so excited to shift in their practice, but also are seeing such wonderful results, especially in those foundational years.
Absolutely. And I'll give it one more big shift is the use of assessments. The New York City required every child in kindergarten to second grade is required to have an Acadience assessment beginning, middle, and end of the year. And there were some hiccups along the way, but NYCPS has done an incredible job ironing out the assessment initiative. And they also have in place that every third through fifth grade student also needs an assessment done beginning, middle, end of year, some type of screener. There's a short list of assessments that you can use in 3 to 5. That has really changed conversations within the school about MTSS It has also really changed parent-teacher conferences when teachers understand how to interpret those scores and communicate the scores to parents. And parents are becoming more knowledgeable about asking about the Acadience results and how their child is doing in relation to grade level expectations.
That's amazing. And it really is so remarkable how once you have the right kind of data, that can just shift everything for you.
Oh, it's so powerful.
And what would you like to see next in New York City public schools?
Well, we're working in New York City now on number one, ensuring that the students who need intervention are getting the right type of intervention. We are working and we're having great conversations around increasing dosage, as well as group size, how many students should be in the group, and how can you get the dosage up for these students. We're also having very important conversations around meeting the needs of multilingual learners and ensuring that we keep multilingual learners at the center of the initiative that's called NYC Reads, making sure that our bilingual programs have high quality instruction, both in English and in the other language provided in the bilingual program. I'm very hopeful, and I hear these conversations that are so thoughtfully guided in New York City. The other thing that we're working on is coherence. So we need to make sure that we are streamlining the programs that teachers are using to teach foundational skills and content knowledge, and making sure that we're not asking too much of teachers with regards to the amount of time that two different programs may take in order to meet all strands of the reading rope. We really do have to continue to improve in those areas.
Yeah, I like that word coherence. Oftentimes we'll hear district leaders say you have to teach with fidelity, but the curricular materials are impossible.
Yeah,
There's just too
yeah,
much. So to think about your data and what kind of instructional decisions do you have to make as a school, which might be different than the school next door,
that's
to make
right.
sure that's all streamlined. This work's never done, even if
That never
you're
done.
doing some
Oh
some
my
wonderful
goodness,
things.
never
So
done.
if you could
Yeah.
wave your Katie Pace Miles magic wand over teacher prep, what
Oh,
is one
teacher
thing that
prep.
you would hope to see in every teacher prep program?
So my big thing about teacher prep is it's obvious that you would want the syllabus for the undergrad and graduate students coming out with their certificate, with their license. Of course, you want that syllabus to reflect science of reading, all aspects of what we know from evidence based instruction, all aspects. But I want to emphasize, I want to highlight that the fieldwork component of the literacy course that students take to become a teacher needs to be very thoughtfully curated. We have to consider as professors, are my students graduating from this course with the experience to actually teach a child how to read over a sequence of lessons? I do this through high impact tutoring using these programs that I could offer to any professor for free. If you need them, please reach out. But you don't need to use those programs. You could use anything. You really have to think. I used to have students do like a read aloud lesson and then a phonics lesson. And I was taking advantage of the school. The school wasn't getting much out of that in return. And my students were not coming out of my coursework actually teaching a child how to read. They had a ton of knowledge on the theories from the field of reading science. They had a lot of knowledge about the translation of research to practice, but they never actually practiced it. And we know from the science of learning, you have to do this. You have to repeatedly do it. And I really do think that the fieldwork component of teacher prep is what can move the needle for both teacher prep, for our local communities, and for just in general for us as a field of education.
Yeah, well said. And I think too, this newer generation of teachers, there seems to be less people wanting to go into education or they leave the field earlier on. You don't have these teachers staying 30, 35 years into retirement. So, like,
Right.
how do we prepare them from the very onset to know, like, I can move this student from A to B
That's
on
right.
my very first year? And
That,
I have the tools that I need to be successful in my role.
Oh, what a great point. Setting everyone up for success the way I felt like I was not set up for
Yeah.
success.
If you can leave educators with just one takeaway of how to align instruction with the reading brain, what would that be?
To align it to the reading brain, if I was to base this on the theory of orthographic mapping, I would say lean into the difficult dorsal pathway, right? That's where the decoding is happening. Lean into that. Ensure that you give enough time in the early years for the child to have enough hits at bat to move from the dorsal pathway into eventually you can luxuriate on the ventral pathway. Just when teachers know, especially those early childhood teachers in pre-K to second grade, they're doing the really tedious, very hard work on ensuring that that dorsal pathway is functioning really well so that eventually the students are able to read words automatically on the ventral pathway. And that reading brain, like it's our job as early childhood teachers to ignite that reading brain and transition students into effortless reading. I'm talking about automatic word reading, obviously, so that your cognitive energy can be put towards comprehension. The goal of reading is comprehension. And so always keeping that in mind. Now, of course, in early childhood, you also are building background knowledge and activating background knowledge, building content knowledge, and all of that. But we really have to make sure we've carved out enough time for students who need more time, facilitating storage of words in long-term memory.
Yeah, I love the brain talk. I can listen
Yeah,
to someone talk about the reading brain all the livelong day. And, it really is inspiring to think as a primary teacher, you're really doing brain changing work.
you are.
And it's not just little drills here and there, it's forming that reading circuit, which is amazing to think about. I am so grateful for this conversation. It is always a joy to be chatting with you. And I know that this will be a real inspiration to those listening. Maybe you can share where listeners can connect with you further.
Oh, that'd be great. Thanks for having me. It's been wonderful talking with you, Michelle, as always. You could connect with me through the Reading Institute, nyc.org. That's where anyone can find Reading Ready, Reading Go, the 10-hour Science of Reading micro-credential or course, if you would like access to that. On the Reading Institute NYC website, you'll see contact us. So by all means, reach out. If you're someone who needs access to the programs through a university or a school or district, please reach out through that link. Also, if you're interested in the advanced certificate in reading science, again, 80% of the seats are held for New York City public school teachers, but we have had students that have come and participated from across the country. So you could find that if you Google Brooklyn College Advanced Certificates in Reading Science, you'll see that there's 2 of those certificates. One is for all grades. That's if you want to be trained pre-K to 12th grade and you want to sit for the New York State exam. Or you could do the emergent grades, which is a 3-course track versus a 5-course track. And finally, any other information on CUNY Reading Fellows, if you're interested in the results of CUNY Reading Fellows, we put out an annual report on the CUNY Reading Fellows website. You could just Google that. And on the left-hand side, you'll find our annual report with data.
Wonderful. I'll be sure to link that all in the show notes as well. So they'll have easy access to look into all of these goodies. Thank you again for coming on the show today.
Thanks, Michelle. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for tuning into Literacy in Color. I hope today's episode left you feeling both inspired and equipped with something new to add to your teaching toolkit. If you're enjoying this podcast, it would truly mean so much to me if you'd leave a 5-star review. It helps other educators find the show and join our colorful community. And don't forget to hit the follow or subscribe button so you never miss an episode. For more tips, tools, and resources, be sure to check out the links in the show notes at michelleandthecolorfulclassroom.com. Thanks again for listening, and I'll catch you next week. Until then, be colorful and teach colorfully.